Hello, this is Chad Payne with Lens Software. In this video I'm going to do a continuation of the RTX Development video series, and we're going to take a look at the functions and the class and the functions of RTX. And these are going to be the functions that you'll respond to when Investor RT calls into your DLL. These are the 5 or 6 or 7 most important functions. It'll call to calculate, it'll call to draw, it'll call to load the parameters, and you'll need to respond to these, and I'll show you how. And we're just going to take a brief look at them. Now, this is a C++ CPP file. If you don't know C++, you're okay. That's fine. You will need to know some C, but if you don't know C++, and if you don't really understand the concept of classes and object-oriented aspect of C++, that's fine. We're going to use very little to none of that. So don't worry too much if you don't know C++. You will need to know some C, and if you don't know C at all, you'll probably need to spend a little time learning the C language. I recommend a book called The Joy of C. That's one that's been around a long time. It's a little pricey, but it's one I used 25, 30 years ago when I was learning C at Georgia Tech and Georgia State. So you will need some experience programming in C. So I would spend a little bit of time getting comfortable with C before you dig into this. But if you have some programming background, that shouldn't be a problem, because C is a very easy language to learn. So at the top here we have, let's see, these are the 6 most important functions. And you won't necessarily use all of them, but you are going to use most of them most of the time, and a lot of times you'll use every one of these. But I'm going to go over each one and just do a high-level overview of what each one does. Now this is the just to discuss a little C++. This is the class called myRT extension. You could call it whatever you want, but you'll never really need to change that if you're just using my templates. You can leave the class alone. Don't worry about that. It's derived from the class CPP extension. You can click on that and go to definitions, see what's there. Again, I pulled out the functions that we're most likely to use. As we get into some more advanced videos, we may use some other functions, but the 6 functions I just showed you are the most likely ones that you'll be using. Okay, so let's just go down and look at all the functions in the file. Now, this is the XYZ demo1.cpp file that I created and was using in an earlier video where I was showing you how to set up a project in Developer Studio. The same file, and I'll share this below the video if you want to import it, experiment with it. You know, also in another video I trimmed this back and showed you how to use what we had done as a template to quickly create your own project. So I would fall back on those 2 videos if you haven't already seen it. Those are good prerequisites for this video. The create extension function, that's the function that's going to set up some of the global defaults really for your extension. You know, it sets the array count. You'll set these flags. For instance, this overlay flag tells it to add it to the same pane as the bars. Okay, it overlays the bars instead of standing alone. If you did not send in overlay, it would be a standalone indicator. And we'll get into some of these. You know, I'll go ahead and look at some more here. You can go to the declaration. You can see a lot of them. Some that I use often, instrument scale. If your indicator should scale to the instrument that's the same as the bars, then you'll send in instrument scale. If when the indicator is added to a chart, you want to send it to the back of everything instead of adding it to the front, then you'll send in this send to back. So these are global default when adding indicators to a chart, and of course the user can then override that by bringing it to the front or changing the scale. You'll find descriptions here for each one, so you can come in here and read over these. And like I said, we'll get into these as the video series continues. So in this function, you can also specify how many arrays you're going to use in your calculation and drawing, the description of your indicator, and that description shows up above the indicator itself, as well as the version, which you also specify here in the create extension. And in the init function, you'll set the version numbers. You may never, if you're only going to create one release, you'll never really need to worry about that version number. But if you're going to create a 1.0, 1.1, then you want to maintain this version number, and we'll talk about where you use that later. Now these next few functions deal with parameters, creating parameters in your preference window, and controlling those parameters, placing them, manipulating them, if you check a box, enabling, disabling other parameters. So in the setup function, that's where you're going to create your parameters. We'll get into that in much more detail in the next video. But you can see here I'm creating a period parameter, a boolean, checkbox, a color control, and another period parameter. You can see here what those 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 controls look like. And down in the parmsLoad function, you actually position these parameters relative to each other with a set parameter position control function. And we'll go over that again when we talk about parameters in more detail. And the parmsUpdt function, that's called any time that a parameter is modified. When a checkbox is checked, it's called and it's sent the parameter number. So you can respond to it by with the appropriate action. In this case, if it's a checkbox, if we check this draw line checkbox, we enable or disable another control based on that. In this case, so when we check this box, we enable that color control to the right, and when we uncheck it, we disable it. Now in the keyboard function, obviously you respond to keyboard events, so you'll be called whenever the up key, down key, left key, right key, or any key is pressed while your indicator is selected. So in this case, the up key with the shift key down, I'm increasing the dot width and I'm decreasing the dot width on the down key. So I'll go show you how that works. So I'm going to select it and then up key, down key, so you can just adjust the dot width. So you can do dynamic adjustments that way from the keyboard. And here you can see some of the other key events that are available. And the mouse function, that's where you'll respond to mouse events. Mouse move events, mouse click events will be the most common. You can also, there's some drawing tool events we'll get into in subsequent videos, and drag and drop. So yeah, this is where you'll tell it if it's selected. For instance, when you get a mouse click in the chart, you can look to see if it's clicking on your indicator and return OK if it's selected, and then you'll see that selection. So my mouse event is returning OK when I click on it. You can see it changes colors, and that's done in the draw routine. I'm increasing the pen width when I'm selected. And the calc function simply calculates, takes the data in the chart, and you have open, high, low, close, and volume data of each bar. You also can dig into the volume at price information within the bar. So you can take that, you can allocate your own arrays, or you can just simply declare any number of arrays where you maintain your data, where you compute and maintain your data. We'll get into all these details in a separate video on the calculation function, but what I'm doing here is simply calculating a simple moving average, very simple calculation, and I know when it's time to recalc instead of a full calc, so I will do an efficient recalc on only the last bar, the last two bars, when that is appropriate. And I'm putting my results in an array I called output 1. And then the draw function, obviously where you draw your indicator. In this case, we're just drawing one array, and we draw dots and or lines here, so it just goes through. You can get the starting and ending visible bars, and then you can draw just what's visible, obviously. So I'm drawing a line. You can get the position of each bar and each price within each bar very easily. Draw lines between them, dots on each bar. A lot of flexibility, and we'll get into that in a separate video on drawing. So those are the 6 or 7 key functions that you'll need to respond to, that InvestorRT will call you and you'll need to respond to as an RTX developer. There are plenty of other functions that you can call back into InvestorRT to get different information. For example, here's one, get visible bars, gets the first and last visible bar. So we'll get into those as we look at each of these functions individually. The next video I'm going to create will be on creating and maintaining your parameters in the preference window. I'll do another one on drawing and another one on calculation. And then we'll get into additional videos on more specifics. So I hope this is helpful. If you have any questions, please email support@lensoft.com. Thank you.